right, so Sylvia Plath and the Bell Jar. Classic book, but is it worth reading? That's what we're going to figure out in this deep dive.
Well, and I'll just say up front, it's kind of a mixed bag. Plath's writing is beautiful, no question. It's almost poetic, which makes sense considering her background, but the content, that can be tough, even a little, triggering for some people.
Yeah, okay, so not exactly a light beach read.
No.
But you mentioned the writing, that beautiful writing. Can you give me just one very specific example of what makes it so captivating?
Oh, absolutely. There's this passage I always think about. It's even highlighted in a blog post by Julia's Books. And Plath's describing cobwebs, right? But she says they touched my face with the softness of moths and in one sweeping tide rushed me to sleep. So she takes something, like cobwebs, pretty ordinary, and turns it into this really delicate but kind of overwhelming image. Really captures how Esther, the main character, how she kind of experiences the world.
Wow, yeah, that is poetic. Okay, but here's the thing. A lot of the reviews, they say this book is depressing, even bleak. And knowing that it's, semi-autobiographical, it draws from Plath's own life, her struggles with mental health. Is it just gave me a downer the whole way through?
It's a fair question, and yeah, it does deal with some heavy stuff, for sure. It's set in the 1950s, so you've got all this pressure on women to conform, be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, and she's really struggling to figure out where she fits in. But here's the thing, and this is important, it's not just all doom and gloom.
Really?
Yeah, there's this dark humor that's woven throughout.
Humor.
Seriously.
In a book about, a mental breakdown?
Yeah, it might seem strange, but it's there. A lot of it comes from Esther's voice. She's so direct, even cynical sometimes, and her observations about the world. They can be really funny, actually. It's like she's calling out how absurd everything is. And there's this one Goodreads review. The user Flo describes the book as a lulling silence, the calm before the storm, which I think really captures that contrast between her, kind of quiet observations and then the turmoil she's going through inside.
Interesting. Okay. I'm getting a better sense of the tone. But yeah, the Bell Jar, everybody compares it to The Catcher in the Rye. And I got to say, Holden Caulfield, I couldn't stand him. So am I going to have that same experience with Esther?
It's definitely a common comparison, and I get why. You've got these young characters, they're both kind of disillusioned with society, can't find their place, that first-person cynical voice. But Esther's journey is very different from Holden's. For one, she's older, and she's facing, challenges that are very specific to being a woman in the 50s. Think about it. The limited career options, the pressure to get married, have kids. Those aren't things Holden, as a teenage boy, really has to deal with.
Okay, so not a direct parallel to Catcher. Any other books it's more closely aligned with?
Some readers compare it to Girl, Interrupted, the way it portrays like mental health institutions, the treatments. And then others have found, like echoes of the perks of being a wallflower, especially with Esther's, very introspective narration, that sense of being an outsider.
Okay, so not Catcher, but maybe some shared DNA with these other coming-of-age type stories.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what makes The Bell Jar so fascinating. It's a product of its time, but it also explores these really universal themes.
Okay. Now, I have to ask about something that popped up in a lot of the Goodreads reviews, kind of a sensitive topic. Some readers mentioned, some problematic elements in the book, like racism, homophobia. How does that play into the reading experience?
Yeah, it's true. Their elements are there. And for a modern reader, they can be really jarring, to be honest. Like, for example, there's a scene where Esther compares her reflection to a big smudgy-eyed Chinese woman. And it's hard to reconcile that with, how we understand racial sensitivity today. There's another review by username Aya, and they point out, Esther uses some racial slurs, and she describes a black male character in a very stereotypical and, harmful way.
Wow. Yeah, that does sound problematic.
It is, and it's something to keep in mind when you're deciding whether or not to read The Bell Jar. It's important to understand, the historical context. This was the 50s. Those kinds of attitudes, they were unfortunately much more common, but it doesn't, excuse it. It just means we have to engage with the book critically, acknowledge its brilliance, but also its flaws.
So, sounds like it's a pretty complex work.
It is. It really is. Beautiful writing, insightful, thought-provoking, but it also reflects, the biases of its time. Okay.
I'm intrigued, I've got to say, but I still need a little more to help me decide if it's right for me.
I understand. And that's exactly what we're going to do next. We'll look at some more comparisons and try to, really help you figure out if The Bell Jar deserves a spot on your reading list.
So we've talked about the writing, how beautiful it is, but also, some of the content can be tough. It's got that dark humor, but not a light read. So if someone's trying to decide if the bell jar is for them, what would you say is the main takeaway?
I think the most important thing is just be aware of what you're getting into. This is a book that will challenge you emotionally, intellectually. You're going to be thinking about societal expectations, about mental health, about, what it meant to be a woman in this very specific time and place.
Okay, going in with eyes wide open. But sometimes those challenging reads are the ones that, stick with you.
Absolutely. And the bell jar, it definitely sticks with you. It's so raw, so honest. Plath doesn't shy away from the darkness, but there's, moments of beauty, even humor amidst all the struggle.
I am curious, though. We mentioned some other books, similar themes, similar style,
Yeah.
but what makes The Bell Jar stand out? Why is it a classic when other books, kind of fade away?
It's a few things, really. Partly, it's the writing itself. Plath's use of language is just so powerful. She creates these, vivid images, metaphors. It gets under your skin. But it's also that rawness, that vulnerability in Esther's voice. She's, laying her soul bare on the page. And that kind of honesty, it's rare, it's powerful. And then you've got the fact that it captures this specific moment in history, the 1950s, and it explores those societal pressures on women in a way that I think still resonates today.
It's interesting thinking about that historical context. Makes you wonder, how would this book be received if it were published, today? You think Plath would write it differently, given, our current awareness of social issues?
That's a great question. It's hard to say for sure. Maybe she would have addressed the racism and homophobia more directly. Maybe Esther's experiences would, reflect a more modern sensibility. But there's also something to be said for reading it as a product of its time, understanding how those societal norms shaped her perspective.
Like holding a mirror up to the past, right? We
Yeah.
see how far we've come, but also how far we still have to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of what makes it so enduring. It sparks these conversations about societal expectations, mental health, the ways we see the world.
So we're getting close to the end of our deep dive here.
Yeah.
I think the big question on everyone's mind is, should I read it?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, the answer depends on you, the reader. If you're looking for something light, escapist, this probably isn't it. But if you are willing to be challenged, to confront difficult topics, to see the world through the eyes of this, truly unique, unforgettable character, then yeah, I think The Bell Jar is worth your time.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface here.
I think we have, yeah. But that's a good thing. It means there's so much more for you to discover on your own.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Yeah.
we've given you a little taste, but the full meal is waiting.
Yeah. And speaking of savoring, one thing I keep coming back to, it's just how much Plath's poetry, her background in poetry, it just shines through in this book.
Yeah, I mean, you really see it in those descriptions, like that one with the cobwebs.
Exactly. And for me, that's one of the most rewarding things about reading The Bell Jar.
Yeah.
It's not just reading a story, it's like you're experiencing it through these images, these metaphors. They're so powerful.
And she takes these ordinary things, and through language, they become really profound.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this book so timeless. Yeah, it's set in a specific time and place, but those emotions, the struggles, trying to find your identity, that resonates with everyone, no matter, what generation you're from.
Okay, so let's put it all together. Knowing everything we've talked about, what kind of reader, what kind of person do you think would really, truly appreciate The Bell Jar?
I would say it's for the reader who wants to be challenged, challenged by the material, by the writing style. If you want something quick and easy, this isn't it. But if you want a book that stays with you, makes you think about the world, your place in it, then yeah, definitely pick up The Bell Jar.
And maybe even revisit it, at different points in your life. I bet it hits you differently depending on, where you are on your own journey.
Oh, for sure. Those themes,
Yeah.
identity, societal pressure, mental health, they mean something different at different times in your life.
So we've covered it all,
Mm.
Beautiful writing, the tough content, the historical context. If you could pick one thing, just one thing, for listeners to remember about The Bell Jar, what would it be?
I think it would be this. The Bell Jar is a complex book, okay? Brilliant, but also flawed. It's a book that will challenge you, it'll provoke you, but in the end, I think it leaves you with this deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
I love that. So to everyone listening, if you're looking for a book that will, push you outside your comfort zone, a book that will leave its mark on you. The bell jar might just be the one. And hey, if you do decide to read it, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, for sure. Happy reading.